is like meta change. There's nothing more inevitable than change. And I have the pleasure to have here Lesley Holmes, who is a Renaissance woman. She's got many talents, and she was Picasso Outstanding DPO 2022. She's going to be telling us about how change is affecting change managers, something I haven't heard before. So I'm looking forward to it. The floor is yours.
Not sure I'm going to cope with all this. I've got paper and this and that and everything else. Right, okay, change. It is inevitable. It is one of those things, it happens. I was talking earlier with Stephen about the change to the high street and the way that the high street has changed over the years. Some areas of high street have changed a lot faster than others. People still remember Ritz and Wilco and some of the other big chains, as Fraser, Debenhams. They've all been replaced by online. Big fashion houses went the same way. So change is inevitable. You don't change, you don't survive. So anyway, see if I can get this the right way around. This is about me. I'm Lesley Holmes. I have a lot of letters after my name, which I don't use. I am a DPO. I work for an HR, payroll and finance software and services company. So we actually manage change as part of our business. But I don't do that. That is not what I do. I'm a DPO, so I have to make sure that people actually comply with the law, which in some respects requires change and a change in behaviours. I have a great deal of fun with that. But we'll talk about that later. So we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about change. Does that look familiar? Oh, that one would appear. It's one of those strange sort of cartoons that is so true. And eventually it will change, but you have that conversation. We don't really want to change, but somebody says we need to, so can you find us a way to do it without actually doing it? Okay, so let's talk about the drivers for change. Four main drivers: legislation, not one that you come across unless you're in the sector, but we will come across it in some areas. HR and payroll, you come across it quite a lot, with changing the rules. Every year you have to update software. But I'll come back to legislation. Improvement, process improvement, improvement in customer service. It comes from all over the shop. And realistically, improvement is one of the biggest drivers because it links to the bottom one, costs. If you can improve customer service, you can improve your customer base. If you can improve the process for your customer service, you can reduce your costs. Therefore, you increase your profit. So it is a big driver. Technology, again, is one that picks up from everywhere. And the reason I'm talking about the drivers is because it has different impacts on you as the change manager. Putting in a piece of technology, to be honest, ain't that difficult. It's not as difficult as putting in a change that can happen. So downsizing an organisation is change. Upsizing an organisation is change. Putting in a piece of technology that makes somebody's life easier is change, but it's less resistant. So therefore, you have a different impact on you. Cutting costs, that one has a different approach. So that's your drivers. We'll come back to these and we start looking at some examples. Methodologies. Big bang. It's happening on that date, regardless. Legislative change requires that. If we want it to not, it requires it. Incremental, well, we'll just do this bit, and then we'll do this bit, and then we'll do this bit, and we'll do this bit. Great. Allows you to test the waters for the change that you're putting in and whether it's actually delivering what you want, but also allows for creep. And scope creep is the killer of a project. And you always get it. One size fits all, doesn't matter who you are, which department you are. You're having it, and this is how you're having it. Doesn't always work. Measured. We'll do a bit, but we'll do it this way for this department and that way for that department. Because some departments are a lot more, and some organisations are a lot more receptive to the type of change than others. So if I give you an example, I work for a large local authority and we were implementing document management. The legal department were crawling all over us to put it in because they could see the benefit of it. We just sort of mentioned it and said, yes, please, us first, now. And they put their own in because we was too slow. But they put in something that then was adapted to what the rest of the organisation thought. Okay, so we've had drivers, we've had change methodology. This is what happened or has happened in retail. We'll sit there and we'll think about it and we'll think about it, but we won't change. This is why you lost Woolworths, Wilko, etc., because they didn't change. They didn't adopt the model of online fast enough. And so it ended up that they didn't survive, which for me is a phenomenal shame because it took something else out of the high street.
And John Lewis is struggling, isn't it?
John Lewis
And
is
they're replacing that White lady, aren't they? Dame White or whatever her name is.
whatever her name is, yes.
Yeah.
But they've embraced the online model. But they've still cut an awful lot of their shops. So the one in Peterborough's gone, the one in Birmingham's gone. There's still one in Solihull and there's still one in Nottingham. But they are becoming fewer and further between. And most of it is shifting online. But that means they need less staff. So it's less costly. Different approach. They've also brought in less expensive ranges, like the Any Day range. So the supermarkets do it the other way. They bring in the premium range to get you to spend more money because it's better product. But the general stuff stays as it is.
And they say waitresses have gone down compared to M&S, don't they?
And if you listen to the adverts, they're bringing their prices down. Same quality, lower prices, really. They're still going to get their margin, but their margin might be smaller. So it is, people are changing. Organisations are changing because they are forced to change. And you can't sit round a boardroom table and say, oh, something magical might happen, because it won't. Unless you drive your own change, nothing will happen. However, I'm not talking about change, and I'm certainly not going to tell you how to do it, because realistically, you've probably got more experience of how to do it than I have. Because I stopped implementing changes probably about 10 years ago, when I went into data protection and actually started looking at information governance and started looking at how people supported the processes they needed to do. It still required a bit of change, but I wasn't managing it. But back in the day, I did. So I'm going to talk about the experience of managing change, not something people talk about a lot. Oh yes, you can be a change manager. I've seen change managers burnt out in 6 months. because of the pressure that they're under to actually deliver change. And especially where that change has been one that is not very welcoming to be changed. So I'll give you a few examples. And I'll give you a few examples that highlight what's on the screen. Okay, I'm ancient. I will admit I am ancient. I remember the days of when we had general rates and when general rates turned into poll tax or community charge. That was in the 1990s. And at that time, I was doing a master's degree. I was also running a department that was implementing that change. Now, that was a political change because it was legislative. You didn't have any option, you had to put it in. It had to be done by the 15th of March in 1990. No ifs, no buts, 15th of March, because that was when the bills were going out. Preferably earlier, but by the 15th of March, the bills had to go out. Otherwise, you couldn't collect the direct debit on the 1st of April. Impacted the organisation's finances. Now, depending on which colour organisation you worked for and how amenable your politicians were to the change that you were implementing, depended on how much support you got. So there were 9 of us in Leicestershire. So I went round the other 8 and did a questionnaire and said, how much support are you getting? What resources are you being given? What doors are being opened for you? And how are you being personally supported? The answers range from, it's great, I have no problem whatsoever, to another poor guy who was basically on his knees because he had no support. The politicians were absolutely dead set against this. So they weren't giving him any money. They weren't giving him any extra staff. And basically he was going around going, how the hell am I going to do this? So the impact of the change was driven in some respects by the political will of the councils that actually were putting this change in. Now, my lot was to the right Genghis Khan. So I was all right. I got the support. I got the money to put the change in. And it was a big change because not only had you got a change of tax collection, you'd got a different audience from whom you were collecting it. Because with the best will in the world, a house or a building does not move. People do. So general rates was based on property and property value. And it sort of went out of favour because the property values were based on something like 1975. We were in the late 80s, early 90s. So they decided to do it partially on property and partially on people. So if there was more than 2 people or more than 1 person in your household, then each person was liable for some of the poll tax. So 50% was your property. And then on top of that was a individual charge for each person. You can imagine the state of that, can't you? So there's 3 adult kids in the household and they're all going, I'm not paying that. That's 200 and odd quid a month. Or 200 and odd quid a year, I think it was at that time. Equivalent to 200 and odd quid a month now. I'm not paying that. Why should I pay that? I just live here. It's my parents' house. They pay the rates. And you can imagine going out and trying to get details of all these people who are living in this house and then getting them to pay it. The arrears went through the roof. But whilst we had a much, much bigger tax base, 2/3 of them didn't want to pay. weren't going to pay. So you had a huge issue. Now, Maggie Thatcher had been told in the mid-80s, it's probably about 83, 84, that as an idea, poll tax was not going to work. And yet she still put it in. And it was proved it didn't work, because by 1993, it was scrapped and we got council tax, which is what we've got now. But the impact on the individuals who were actually managing that change was huge, because most of us had absolutely no project management experience. We had no understanding of a lot of the stuff that we were expected to do, like rewrite computer systems, work with people to do that, to go out and survey people. You were looking at changing the benefit system change, so you had to do all the training for that, and then you had to do all the training for your staff to do whatever, and then you had to have a new filing system, and then because of all these extra new staff that you had to have, oh, I need a new building. How do I source a new building? And you're spinning balls that you have absolutely no idea how to do. And as I say, some of us, it was dead easy. For others who were to the left of Red Ken, I think, it was, how can I put it? It was soul destroying, because they didn't get the support. And to be honest, it just about did this poor bloke who was not being supported. He ended up nigh on a nervous breakdown. He got demoted, got somebody brought in above him, purely because he couldn't manage that change. He hadn't got the resource to do it. So it's hugely, and I mean hugely, impactful. And what we learned out of that was, in order to be a good change manager, you need to be able to move from one, what they call ego state, to another. Have you ever heard of ego states? Yeah, you have. Right, the ego states, there's 3 of them: parent, adult, child. And you move from one to another depending on who you're dealing with. So for some people, you're a parent and you're telling them what to do. For some people, you're an adult and you're on a straight negotiation, no problem. And for some people, you become a child and manipulate the hell out of them. Because you have no choice. It's not something that I would prefer to do, but it is something that I have done. Okay. Now, when poll tax was got rid of, oh, I've got all this extra stuff. I don't need them anymore. So they went through a huge downsizing. Now by this time I was in the consultancy, and we were brought in effectively to manage the downsizing from the point of view of, we don't want blaming for a new staffing structure, so we'll get a third party in so we can blame somebody else. They said that's what we need, that's what we need, your job's on the line. It's great. Sometimes that doesn't always work. And sometimes you end up with an organisation that has more jobs at the end of its process than it's got people to fill them. That's a good outcome, because the people who have the opportunity have taken the opportunity and moved out. Not everybody does. But then you look at different sorts of change. So implementing technology is a different change, because it's not about your job, it's about the tools you use to do your job. So another implementation, not a local authority, surprisingly. I worked a lot with local authorities, but another local authority wanted to put in a new system. And the staff are chuntering. So we get brought in and the staff are there and they're chuntering away. And we say, well, what's the problem? Well, we'll just get what we're given. We'll have absolutely no choice in it. So we thought, right, okay, how do we get them back on board? So we created a group from the staff to actually look at the new suppliers and have a voice in relation to the new suppliers. Now, in doing that, one of the things we had to do was work out the weighting of the various aspects of the tender. So price is always going to be about 45–50% because that's what the bean counters require. But things like usability and functionality, etc., are important to the staff because they're going to use it on a day-to-day basis. So what we did was there was 10 criteria. We had a group in the staff, there was about 10 of them. So we went out to the local shop and bought some bags of sweets. Cheat this. So we gave each person 10 sweets. We then had to replenish a few as they sat there and ate them, but never mind. But we gave them 10 sweets and we said, put your 10 sweets wherever against the 10 criteria, wherever you think it's more important. What is most important to you? And then what we did was we tallied up the votes effectively. And that was their criteria. We did exactly the same with the management team. And then we aggregated them. And we explained to the staff that's what we were going to do, and that's what we did. And what they felt was a lot more included, a lot more engaged in the process. They were also the people who did the beauty parades. The management were not included in the beauty parades at all. So effectively, the staff had the opportunity to go with every supplier and say, does it do this? Does it do that? How does it do this? So that they could then challenge the delivery of what was they were going to buy. Because at the end of the day, they were going to use it. And it engaged them so much that actually when they made the choice and implemented it, went straight through. Everybody was engaged because the people who were going to use it were engaged. That made my job as project manager, change manager, a lot easier because I wasn't constantly trying to sell the change because they'd already sold it. And that's one of the things that you find as a change manager is you are constantly selling the change and it becomes tiring. And so change managers will do a change and then they'll go off and do something else for a period of time. Okay, so we've looked at some of the challenges and some of the support. And realistically, you have to get support. The sponsor of this change has to support it. What you don't need is somebody who says to your face, yeah, you're doing a grand job, it's everything we want, and then behind your back actually undermining you, either at management level or even with the staff, because that just makes your life a lot harder. And it's tiring, it's very tiring. The perception. If you're an external change manager, the perception is that you get paid an absolute shed load and do nought. It's true. You don't get paid an absolute shed load. You don't do nought. You do an awful lot. But that is the perception. People see you parachuted in to do a change, especially when you're downsizing an organisation. That is hard. Because the perception is you're just there to come. I got a reputation. I walked into an organisation and the staffing reduced by 25%. And the more I did it, the more it got reinforced. And that was very, very hard. Because these were people you were dealing with. They thought it was you were just dealing with numbers. You weren't. Because you were talking to these people and what they did. So the impact on you is dependent on what is that change and how is that change going through. Okay, so we've looked at a few examples. So Leicestershire, I've talked about, that was where we upsized for community charge. That was a hard change. I was in my mid-20s when I did that. And that was seriously hard because I just hadn't got the experience. And I'd gone into a new job. I hadn't got a clue what I was doing. And we'd already done one legislative change before that in 86, 87. So for 88. So then this on top of it was quite difficult. Okay, let's have a look a bit more at technology changes. These are the easiest of them because usually as a change manager or a project manager, you're brought in after somebody else has already chosen whichever supplier it is you're going to buy something off. And for our project managers for the company I work for, they are implementation managers. They follow a set path. That's how it's done. What we did find and what I found when I worked in Cornwall was the difficulty of actually engaging the business in doing what was needed to drive technology change. So when you put a piece of technology in, you have a project manager from the suppliers and they have their project schedule and they know it's going to slip, and you have your project manager on your side who knows it's going to slip because I can't get Fred to do this, or nobody's run that report, or that bit of code or whatever it is that I need for this in there, or nobody's balancing it, so we can't go live. When I went into Cornwall, that was the case. So they've been managing this project. I felt sorry for the poor bloke that had been doing it. He'd been on Prince 2 foundation course one day or 2 days. That's it. Nothing else. And he was given a fairly major project to replace their revenues and benefits system. He had not got a clue. That wasn't his fault. And they've been trying to put this in for about 6 months. I wanders in May and they said, oh, we're going live on the 1st of July. No, you're not. You're not hoping hell are you going live on the 1st of July. You'll be lucky to go live on the 1st of October. Oh, I said, well, you haven't done that, you haven't done that, you haven't done that, and you haven't done that. The stress on this poor bloke that I took over from was huge because he did not have the skills to do it. And he didn't have the support of his colleagues to actually do it. So asking somebody to manage a project or manage a change is without them having the skills, but also the clout to say, I need you to run that report. Now I then need you to balance this that's coming back from the supplier. They've uploaded it. They've said it does this. It needs to balance. And he hadn't got the clout to enable him to demand that. So I wanders in and says, right, we're doing this. We got back on track, we rescheduled, and then we hit the problem of supplier slip. Because they booked us consultants for given days, we were ready for the consultants, but the consultants weren't available because they'd expected us to slip again. So again, a bit more pressure on the project, but you've got to have the ability and the backing from your employer to actually say, we haven't slipped, we're on time, get your consultants here. Because some of the big suppliers will expect to slip, fine, we didn't want to slip any further. We'd already slipped 3 months. So that was that one. So let's have a look at a different one. Let's have a look at improvement, cost, downsizing, etc. So I went to another local authority in Northants, and this was, they wanted to put in a document management system, and they needed to restructure their organisation to downsize. We had a lot of union involvement in this one, and they were a pain in the neck. I had very little time for them because I thought that they actually sold the staff down the river. I didn't say that. But it made it incredibly difficult because every time we tried to engage the staff in new job descriptions, in new ways of working, new team structures, anything like that, the union said, they're not experts, they can't possibly help you do that. Excuse me? They do the job. Of course they're experts. But that was what we were hitting on. And again, it's tiring. I was working probably 4 days a week there. And 4 days a week, by the 5th day, I was absolutely shattered. And the bigger the change, the more tired you become. So that was that one. Another one that I did, which was quite interesting, was implementing a document management system, was on the island of Guernsey. Lovely place, there quite a long time. But I actually started to look at process maps and how they were doing stuff. And because we were actually sat down with them looking at this process you do now, so we didn't do the proper business process re-engineering where you start with a blank piece of paper, because nobody does. Nobody ever does that. What we did was effectively a review of their process. So we looked at how do you do it now, and how do you think we could shortcut that? So we looked at every process that they had, and we mapped it out, and then looked at how do we actually shorten it down. So that was quite good because the staff were engaged with it, because everything that we did, they'd been involved in. So it made it easy. And that was one of the ones where at 3 days a week, even though I was flying in, flying out, that was a simple one. That was an enjoyable change to do, because I wasn't constantly fighting. They fought amongst themselves, but that wasn't my problem. So for me, the difficulty you get, how long have I got left? How long have I got?
Another 20 minutes.
Oh, that's all right then. Keep it going. Sorry. Please feel free to interject if you want to. So what do you need? For a change manager, the skills that you need are a breadth of knowledge. And that's not just a breadth of knowledge about particular technologies, about change methodology, about drivers or whatever. It's actually about business process and people, because at the end of the day, every change impacts people. And it's the people that make your life easy or hard. Technology is, well, to be honest, I'm agnostic about technologies. It doesn't matter. It's a piece of technology. It does a job. It's the people that it impacts that makes the difference to what you expect to achieve out of it. You also need to engage and find subject matter experts. You cannot be a subject matter expert in anything and everything. What you need to be as a change manager is a subject matter expert in managing change and managing people and manipulating people, because I'm very good at that. Bribery goes a long way. We used to rock up with cake every now and then. Worked. Not gonna challenge that one. So yeah, bribery works well. Managing your suppliers' expectations. If they think you are going to slide, they'll expect you to. So it's actually saying, we're not going to slide. We're actually going to do this on time. Especially with things like legislative change, you don't have any choice. It's got to be done back. Otherwise, the consequences are huge. I remember, going back to the days of council tax and community charge and what have you, the government decided to grant a £120 discount. And I can't remember whether it was community charge or council tax, but it was £120 discount. They announced that on to be effective from the 1st of April. That was fun. We were lucky. We hadn't actually printed the bills, but there were people who had. And when you've got, I don't know, 35, 40,000 bills that you're about to put through the shredder, that's a lot of money down the tubes. And it's, have you got enough stationery to run it again? Because whilst now they're laser printed and they're all black and white and what have you, in those days they weren't. They were nice, they were coloured, they were fancy. Managing your project board or program board, because you might be a program manager managing change, and I've been through a few of those. Ways of working is a favourite one. We're going to change the way you work. We're going to take away your nice fixed desk, your nice fixed PC, and we're going to say, right, here's the laptop. You no longer have a fixed desk. In fact, you no longer have the right to a desk at all. So we're moving our desk ratio from 1:1 to 7:10. So that's 7 desks, 10 people. Because we've worked out that desks are empty this much of the time because you're on holiday or off sick or you're in a meeting. Now, if you're in a meeting that lasts more than an hour, you have to give your desk up. This was great fun. So, and then they moved to, I think it was 5 to 10 was the next change. So 5 desks, 10 people. Then we had COVID, so that was fine because it's no people and loads of empty desks until they wanted to go back in the office. I know of a local authority who is still selling buildings, and they are condensing their buildings down so much so that they have one in the north of the county and one in the south of the county, and that will be it. Everybody else works from them. Book when you're going in to make sure you've got a desk to go to. Now, IBM, believe it or not, had that desk booking system probably in 2005, 2006. Before that, I know it was a long time ago. And British Telecom put it in around about 2009 because they were the flagship that we used. But what they found, and this was talking to other people who'd been through the process, what they found was that you ended up carrying your desk. So you carried your tea and your coffee and what have you, because they don't provide it for you. And you carried your mug because you had a locker that was probably not much bigger than two pieces of A4 to put all your stuff in. But you were only expected to be in the office 1 day a week or 2 days a week. And you might move desks and you might move around the building. So everybody ended up with basically either in a backpack, their office, or in the boot of their car. It did wonders for data privacy, but never mind. So that was the sort of thing. The advantages of that, business continuity. If you've got a laptop, you can work from home, no problem. So our organisation, when COVID hit, went from everybody in the office, because we're one of those sorts of businesses that likes to see people, to everybody at home in 2 days. It was that quick. Purely because of the business continuity of everybody took their laptop home. So that was a useful part of it. But that again was a huge change. Managing them back into the office was a bit more of a how can we say, struggle. I'll put it that way. But again, the other thing that you take into account is when managing expectations, you've got 3 sets of stakeholders: suppliers, staff, and the management, the project board and the project sponsors, the people who want this change to happen. Now, if it's a, how shall I say, a voluntary change, then actually that works to your advantage. The people who want it to happen will support you to make it happen. If it's a non-voluntary, they have a choice whether they support you or not. So, just to round this off before I open it for questions, my takeaways from this is, if you're going to implement technology, highly engage the people who are going to use it and give them a voice in its choice, because that way your job, your route is a lot easier. If you're going to do something that is negative for an organisation, i.e. downsizing, changing the way they work in order to reduce overheads, etc., be transparent about it, be fair, and actually explain it to them. And give them an opportunity and the support to move to a different organisation. It's not beyond the realms of anybody or any organisation to actually enable people to move on. Is it McKinsey's or Kinsey's that's the big consultancy firm that's paying people to go and find another job? Because they need the downside. They need to downsize. They've got too many people. And they've given people a year's salary to take away and go and find another job, please. I like that one. And the overarching thing for all of this is, remember, it's not personal. Because if you start thinking it is, it's hard. Okay, that's me. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Lesley.
You're welcome.
A lot of insights into what is the insights of change management. Any questions in here? Any questions?
Yes, yes, something that came up from towards the end of what you were saying. I mean, you mentioned about working from home, where businesses had to make quite in some cases, a quick decision. And you said about some where everyone's got their office in their box or whatever, they can go literally anywhere. But while people were away and working from home during the pandemic and so on, then there was a sort of change in certainly the company I work for in the sense of recruitment. Previously, you would recruit people who can travel to the office, and now, as a London-based company, it's easy. You might as well recruit from Scotland because it doesn't make any difference. And therefore, that's the situation.
Yeah.
That then means you can't go back, doesn't it? It's the same as you were saying about you sell off all your offices because you've decided to do something. You've I mean, it's a case of you committed to that effectively.
And interestingly, Deloitte's buying offices again. Because they sent a lot of their people hybrid and divested themselves of offices in London, and they're buying real estate now. They're bringing people back in. One of the things with the pandemic and the changes to the way people work is that, and I have examples of this, where you've recruited new talent, youngsters, actually leaving them to work from home is bloody awful. I know somebody who was on the Bright Star program with Deloitte. Now you've got to be good to get on that. And she told them to shove it because they left her at home on her own, staring at a screen without the level of support that's needed. So I know of another organisation whereby new starts, especially apprentices, have to be in the office for the first 6 to 9 months. But the people that support them also on a rotational basis have to be in the office. Because there's so much that's changed around the way that people work and the way that people manage people in a hybrid environment. The amount of monitoring that goes on, and interestingly, the increase in sales in mouse jigglers that has gone on over the last few months is quite frightening.
What was that you said?
The interest in the, or the increase in the sales of mouse jigglers.
Of what?
Mouse jigglers. It's a little pad that you put your mouse on and it.
Oh.
So it gives the impression that you are
Yes.
doing something.
Yes.
People have that. There's software, isn't there? Monitoring, and I've seen them having remote workers with cameras on them and motion sensors.
It is so intrusive.
Right.
Real, but
Yeah.
yes. And this is part of the change. And it's things we need to be thinking about with how privacy intrusive is that activity and how much do you need it? Because when people were in the office, they were managed under presenteeism. It didn't mean to say they were productive, it just meant to say they were there.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of unproductive people who used to go to the office. People at home fall into a number of categories, but broadly, those who were present in the office and did bugger all are now at home using the mouse jiggler, still doing bugger all. And those who are so frightened to call in sick, so frightened to move away from their desk to make a cup of tea because they're being monitored and are overworking the hours because that's what they think the expectation is. The perception of working from home for either side is totally wrong. We should be managing by productivity. We should be managing by quality of work, not by where somebody does it or even when somebody does it. You know, I know people who work best at 2 or 3 in the morning.
But you get penalized for that.
Sorry?
You get penalized. You have to make sure that you schedule the emails to go out at 0800, but not send them
What's
at
that?
300. Yeah.
That's the thing. I don't like people who send me an email at 8, 9 o'clock at night because I could then feel pressured to respond to it immediately. Not that I actually respond to it at that time of night, bear in mind, 5:30 and I'm done. Because for me, that is enough. But yeah, it is all about how do we manage that change back to a good working environment. COVID was awful. It really was awful because you were tied to the house And you couldn't go out, so what did you do? You just worked. I was fortunate I didn't. I did work, but I wasn't tied to the house. I had to go out. I have animals, I have to go out. Therefore, I had an excuse. And that started and finished my day for me. But there were a lot of people who didn't have that, whose children were, in some respects, didn't get the routine of a day because they didn't go to school. So they did their schoolwork as and when, if they ever did it at all. So it's managing that change back in. Some people have been very good at it and some people haven't. Any more?
The example of the union coming in and trying to help out their members. How did that, in principle, without going into the details of that, how did that work out in the end?
Not good. From the point of view that there were sufficient roles in the downsized organisations for everybody to actually have a role. May not have been at the level they were at before, but there was a role there for everybody. What we did was we asked everybody to apply for the job they wanted. It's not necessarily the job they were in, but to apply for the job they wanted and any other jobs as backup if they didn't get that one. And I think two people in that organisation ended up without a role because the unions did not insist that anybody who was unsuccessful for a role that they had applied for was slotted in. And they didn't insist on it, so they didn't go. And I felt that was just totally wrong. And I'm a staunch union supporter, but I just felt they got shafted. The staff got, and it was full-time union rep, which even wound me up even more.
So did the union have its own kind of vested interest that was not?
I have got no idea.
I mean, in a dynamic sense, not particularly in that particular sense.
Yeah, but no, the union was there to represent its members.
But it wasn't kind of, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes they are focusing on something else. Yeah.
Well, I think she focused on something else.
Yeah. Okay.
The organisation was focused on getting rid of her. Which eventually they did. They moved her into the union. They stopped paying her. The union paid her instead. And then she moved off somewhere else. Great.
I do have questions.
Yeah.
So how do you change the mindset of a top management? Because normally they do have, I mean, they know
Yes.
the change is important,
Yeah.
but they just want to get someone to hold accountable for that change. So if that change does not work, they have someone to blame for.
Absolutely.
So how do you change their mindset? There is a bigger challenge than normally.
Okay, so we call this BSE culture. Blame somebody else.
Hello. Yes, I've come across that.
Well, it came out of the BSE and the mad cow disease.
Yes.
So it's blame somebody else. To change a mindset of an organisation, what you've got to do is prove that the change wasn't going to work in the first place. Because otherwise, if it doesn't work, they'll blame you. But if it's unachievable, and then sometimes parts of a change are unachievable because their expectations are just so far out of what you can achieve, what you've got to do is convince them that that part of the change isn't going to work. Here is an alternative. So you can never go in and say, I'm not doing that. What you can go in and say, that's not going to work, but this could. Based on your experience, based on what you've done before, etc. So putting my DPO hat back on, a lot of the things that they do in our organisation is develop software. Great. And they come in and they say, oh, we want to do this. You go, all right, okay, fine. We want to put AI in this bit. Okay, so what's the risk? What's the implications of this? Can you explain it? And as soon as you put that in, they start to think and the mindset starts to change. Because if they can't explain it to me, they're never going to be able to explain it to the person in the street whose data they're dealing with. So it's pulling in your overarching knowledge of business change, change management, to say, I've been here before, this won't work because, but here is an alternative that will achieve what you want, but in a different way. Because sometimes you get given, here's the brief, and it's so detailed, you think, it's not going to work. Or you say, if we're going to sell this, you've got to back it. You've got to make sure that you're 100% behind it, because if you're not, the staff are not going to take it. So it's actually, how wedded to it are they, is the first question. And the next question, is there a viable alternative? Because sometimes they want to achieve something, especially downsizing. They need to look at how they do it. And it might be that actually you consolidate into a particular arena or a particular area of work. Or you consolidate your buildings down, different way of doing it. And you also look at natural wastage and people who might take voluntary redundancy or voluntary early retirement that don't fall into the trap that two organisations did. One was HSBC, or formerly known as the Midland Bank. They offered all their expensive branch managers early retirement.
Who got killed in the rush.
Got killed in the rush, but also their default on lending went sky high because the young, capable, energetic, cheaper bank branch managers who hadn't got the lending experience were actually lending money that was more risky. So they default. So what they did was they brought all these ex-managers back
Probably.
to mentor the youngsters.
After they'd had the redundancy pay.
After they'd had their redundancy in their early retirement.
It's like a bonus.
I think a large software house made the same mistake.
Mhm.
Um,
And a local authority had 300 years of experience in one department, walk out the door on the same day. And all that knowledge, because they didn't do any knowledge harvesting. So that's one you don't do. But, you know, planned early retirement, etc., can be useful.
I used to teach on the MBA, and if you had managers who'd done an MBA, I taught subjects like change management, organisational behaviour, project management. If they've done those, they should be able to cope with change without bringing people like yourself in. What are they getting paid for if they can't do that?
Because a lot of them want to. The three reasons you bring a consultant in. One, you haven't got the skills. Two, you want to blame somebody else. And three, you really don't think it's going to achieve.
If you did it yourself, it won't work.
And sometimes it's the BSE culture for consultants is rife. In there, got that T-shirt, and you walk out of somewhere and it's your fault. It's always your fault. But because you can walk out the door, you can leave it behind you. An internal change manager can't. And that's the other thing. But a lot of people, A lot of organisations send their people on an MBA and then never utilise the skills they've taught. them.
Terrible.
Yeah, it is. It's a complete waste of money.
I worked in Birmingham and BT had a big, going back 20, 30 years, they had a big office there and they made loads of people redundant. They came out with big payments, but all the technical staff were re-engaged with an outside company as contractors.
Yeah.
And it was administrators who couldn't get another job, but the technical guys, they came back as freelance with a contract agency on more money. Obviously, they lost all the conditions you get with a staff job, you know, paid holidays,
Yeah.
and redundancy and unions and all that, you know,
Pensions and-
but they were on good money.
Yeah, and the reason they're on good money is because they don't get all of that. So they
Mm.
don't get an employer's
Yeah.
contribution to the pension. They don't get paid sick pay. They don't get paid holidays. And
But a lot of companies have done that. They get rid of people, then they bring them back as self-employed. That,
Yeah.
and then the government clamped on the tax, wasn't it? The tax breaks and that. And there was a big row about that. If they, and you couldn't be independent unless you had employees and all that rubbish, you know.
Yeah. Been there as well.
I forget the acronym they used for that one, but that was going around for years.
Fire and rehire.
Yeah,
And the government tax one was IR35.
that's the one, yeah.
And IR35 originally hit the public. So originally, it was for blue collar workers
Yeah.
and the construction trade.
And-
Then they brought it in for the public sector
Mm.
and a lot of public sector
But the
people.
banks are using it a lot as well.
Yeah, a lot of public sector consultants just upped the rates.
And it
to
wasn't
take it-
just IT people.
No, it was all sorts of people.
Yeah.
Because I was working for a local authority as a consultant when that came in. But because I wasn't doing somebody's job, I got away with it. So I didn't get caught by IL35, but there were a lot of people who did. And then there were a lot of organisations who will not employ a consultant unless they are inside IL35. And it's an absolute pain, but all they do is ramp the fee. Because they have to pay employer as well as employee national insurance. They have to pay their tax and so on and so forth. So they just hike the fee by 25 to 30%. And that happened, believe it or not, HMRC got caught with their own rules because they had consultancy. We calculated or did the software that was calculate whether you were inside or outside of IR35. And when they brought it in, those consultants said, oh, well, either you pay us another 30% or we're out the door. They paid another 30%, so they got caught by their own. But yeah, it was good fun. But now it's gone out private industry. Everybody's either in or out of IR35.
I have a question, one question for you.
I'll go on then.
Is there a good change?
Yes. When you increase the size of an organisation because it's doing well. Now, some organisations will try and do that very rapidly. Paul foul. I was talking to somebody who had that problem. And some organisations will do it incrementally. So for us, we've had to change as an organisation. We have an established product. And we've just launched, well, relaunched a new one. And that new product's very, very different. Needs a completely different skill set of engineers and what have you. So what we are doing is, as we sunset one, we are upskilling our engineers to actually do the work on the new one. So we have a remote team at the moment, but that remote team will eventually be replaced by people we already have. So that is a good change. It changed, considered from the perspective that I have good resources. rather than just saying, I'm throwing that away, bringing in bright new shiny.
Did you find that some organisations have got a problem whether to decide to keep staff in or use outside contractors, you know, where if they're outside, you know, you lose some control. Obviously, a lot of firms do it for pay as you earn, because that's a well-established, well-known process, which is pretty safe. But other things, you know, outsourcing all the computer stuff, you know, you lose control of the databases and all this. I'm sure that must be a problem you've probably come across.
Yes. Outsourcing was a huge thing in the.
Because they think they're saving money, but often they don't, do they?
They don't, no. Early 90s, local authorities were expected to tender a percentage of their services. So some of them tendered things like highways, bin collection.
Bin collection is well known, isn't it?
That is a well-known one. Parks and gardens, street cleaning, all those sorts of things was prime target for it. But the other area that was prime target was revenue and benefits. And the reason that was prime target was it was transactional. It was a license to print money for the suppliers because the contracts weren't tight enough. Because the government changes the legislation in relation to that on such a regular basis, every change they got hammered for. So, no, it doesn't always save you money. Sometimes you can benefit, but organisations in the public sector can do, which the private sector can't very well, if they can share service. So they have one HR service or one revenue service that covers 4 local authorities. That works. That saves money.
I was working in polytechnics and they became new universities.
Yes.
And independent. And so we weren't paid by the local authority anymore.
No.
And the local authority says, oh, we'll still do your wages.
Yeah.
But the vice chancellor is short of money. He said, no, we can get it done cheaper somewhere else.
Yeah.
He had all those sort of things
all
going
that
on.
sort of stuff went on. Services to schools and so on and so on. I shut up.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very insightful. So here,
Hi. Hold on. Thank you very, very much. Something Lesley mentioned is the changes we had in the last few years, especially during COVID, for downsizing, for being stuck at home. Everything led to a big problem in mental health, whether it's stress, depression, or even more. Some of us were affected by that, and even when, if we are not, some people we know affected by it.
Absolutely.
We are going to tackle this problem in our talk in 22nd of May. And Andrew Shaw is going to talk about mental health, a time for a change in the IT industry. And we'll see, it's an experiment, so let's see what's going to happen.
Be really interesting.
Thank
Are there any refreshments tonight or not?
Yes, we have a refreshment. Also, we have another event, our next event on
on the 16th.